Hermione told herself it was simple. The pull between them was an accident of proximity, a pressure build-up, a temporary distortion caused by isolation and exhaustion and the strange way the ward-neutral field seemed to amplify everything they didn't say. It was not real. That was the story she repeated as she traced runes with steady hands and pretended her pulse didn't change every time Draco Malfoy spoke. The problem was that the ward didn't care what she told herself. It cared what she felt. By late afternoon, the forest had grown unnaturally quiet again. Not threatening, just watchful. Hermione ran a diagnostic pulse and waited for the familiar shimmer. Nothing. She recalibrated and tried again. Still nothing. Draco's voice came from behind her, calm and restrained. "You're doing it again." Hermione didn't turn. "Doing what?" "Chasing an answer you can't force," he said. "I'm not chasing," she replied tightly. "I'm confirming." He made a soft sound, half exhale, half amusement. "Call it what you like." Hermione clenched her jaw and kept working. If she looked at him, she might say something reckless. If she didn't look at him, she could pretend she was in control. It was a weak strategy. She was halfway through another set of calculations when the words slipped out, unplanned. "When we get back," she said. Quill paused mid-line. "I'll have to file a report." Draco didn't respond immediately. "A report?" "Yes," Hermione said, as if it were obvious. "Details. Sequence. Why the portkey failed. Who approved the evacuation basket. Who keyed it. Who signed off on single-use distribution." "Sounds thrilling," he said dryly. "It's procedure," Hermione replied. "And after the report?" Draco asked. Hermione hesitated. "After I go back to work." He was silent for a moment. "Back to your desk. Your committees. Your endless lists of things that need fixing." "Yes," she said, a little sharper than necessary. Draco's voice lowered. "And you'll be surrounded by people again." Hermione frowned, and finally turned to look at him. He stood near the boundary, arms folded, expression blank in the way it became when he was trying to look indifferent and failing. "Obviously," she said. "The ministry is full of people." Draco's gaze flicked away. "Right." Hermione stared at him, confusion tightening in her chest. "What is this?" He met her eyes again, and something in his expression made her stomach drop. Not anger, not sarcasm. Something far more dangerous. Restraint. "Nothing," he said. "It's not nothing," Hermione replied. "You're tense." He gave a humorless laugh. "You're observant." "Malfoy," she said quietly. "What is it?" He hesitated. Then he exhaled, slow and controlled. "You said you'd go back to work." "Yes." "And you'll go back to them," he added. Hermione blinked. "To who?" Draco's jaw tightened. "To everyone." The word landed strangely, heavy with meaning it shouldn't have carried. Hermione's heart thudded once, hard. "You mean people like Kingsley? Robards? The Auras? The committee members?" Draco's eyes narrowed slightly. "Do you enjoy listing them?" Hermione's brows drew together. "Why does it matter?" His gaze dropped briefly, to the front of her robes, the cloak clasp she'd been using to keep warm, the one he'd given her. Then his eyes lifted again, sharp. "It shouldn't," he said. "That's the point." Hermione's mouth went dry. "Are you—" Draco cut her off before she could finish. "Don't," she swallowed. "Don't what?" "Don't make me say it," he replied, voice low. "Not yet." Hermione stared at him, pulse racing for no logical reason. Why not? Because if he said it, it would be real. And if it was real, they couldn't keep pretending this was just survival. Draco's shoulders rose with a controlled breath. "Because it's ridiculous." "It's not ridiculous," Hermione said, before she could stop herself. His eyes snapped to hers. "It is." "It isn't," she repeated, softer. Silence stretched. The fire popped gently. The ward hummed above them, steady and patient, like it was listening. Hermione's voice came out quieter than she expected. "You're jealous." Draco's expression tightened. "I'm not." "You are," Hermione insisted. He looked away again, jaw clenched. Jealousy implies competition. Hermione took a slow step closer. Not close enough to set the ward off, not close enough to touch. Close enough to make the air feel different. "There isn't any," she said. Draco's laugh was short and sharp. "Exactly." The confession was there without the words. Jealousy without rivals. Wanting without permission. A reaction to a future that didn't include this clearing, this silence, this strange closeness they'd built by accident. Hermione's chest tightened. "I didn't plan for this." "I know," Draco said. "I didn't plan to feel anything," she added. Draco's eyes lifted back to hers, steady and dark. "Neither did I." Hermione held his gaze. "So what do we do?" Draco's answer was immediate. Too controlled. "Nothing." Hermione's throat tightened. "Nothing?" "We wait," he said, like it was a command he could give his own heart. "We get back. We pretend this never happened. We go back to our separate lives." The ward pulsed, faintly, like a warning. Hermione froze. Draco did too. Both of them felt it. Both of them understood what it meant. Even the magic didn't believe him. Hermione's voice softened. "You don't want that?" Draco's jaw worked once. "Want is irrelevant." Hermione took one careful step back, as if she were handling something volatile. "Right," she said. She turned away before her face could betray her, before he could see how much his words had cut. Behind her, Draco's voice followed, quiet, strained. "Granger." She didn't answer. Because if she did, she might ask for something he wasn't ready to give. And if she asked, she didn't know if she could survive hearing no. That night, Hermione lay awake longer than usual, the cloak heavier on her shoulders than it had ever felt. Across the clearing, Draco kept watch. He didn't look at her. But Hermione could feel the truth anyway, humming in the space between them like a spell that had already been cast. There were no rivals, no competition, just the terrifying certainty that Draco Malfoy didn't want to lose her and didn't know how to ask her to stay. The night was too quiet. Not the calm kind. Not the peaceful kind. The kind that pressed in, insistent, as if waiting for something to be said. Hermione lay awake with her eyes closed, listening to the rhythm of the clearing, the fire's low crackle, the ward's steady hum, the controlled cadence of Draco Malfoy's breathing as he kept watch. She couldn't do this anymore. Pretending, circling, saying everything except the truth. She sat up. "Draco," he turned immediately. "Yes." She swung her legs over the edge of the small bedroll, heart hammering so hard she was sure he could hear it. "We need to talk." A pause. Then carefully. "All right." He didn't move closer. Didn't retreat. Just waited. Hermione took a breath. "What you said earlier. About going back. About pretending none of this happened." Draco's jaw tightened. "Yes, I can't," she said simply. His eyes lifted to hers, sharp and searching. "Can't what?" "Pretend," Hermione replied. "Not after this." Silence stretched. Thick. Taut. Draco exhaled slowly. "You think I don't know that? Then why say it?" She demanded softly. "Why tell me we should go back to nothing?" "Because wanting something doesn't make it possible," he said quietly. "And acting on it might ruin what we've managed not to destroy." Hermione swallowed. "That sounds like fear." His mouth curved in a humorless smile. "That's because it is." She stepped closer, careful, deliberate, stopping well short of the ward's threshold, close enough to feel the heat of him again, the gravity. "I'm afraid too," she admitted. "But I'm more afraid of lying to myself." Draco's gaze dropped to the space between them. You're not good at half measures. No, Hermione agreed. And neither are you. He closed his eyes briefly. This doesn't end well. You don't know that. I do, he said. Because the moment we cross that line, we can't uncross it. Her voice was steady, even as her heart raced. I'm not asking to cross it. His eyes snapped open. You're not? No, she said. I'm asking to acknowledge it. The words settled between them, dangerous and clarifying. Draco studied her for a long moment. You feel it too. It wasn't a question. Yes, Hermione said. Another silence. This one felt like the world holding its breath. Draco ran a hand through his hair, tension visible in every line of him. Then we're in trouble, Hermione nodded. Probably. He let out a short, incredulous laugh. You're remarkably calm about that. I'm not, she said. I'm just done pretending this is nothing. Draco took a careful step toward her, then stopped himself, fists clenching at his sides. I want you, he said quietly. And I shouldn't. Hermione's breath hitched. I know, and I don't trust myself not to make this worse. He continued. Not if we let it go any further. She met his gaze, eyes bright but resolute. Then we don't. His brow furrowed. We don't... What? We don't act on it, Hermione said. Not now, not like this. Relief flickered across his face, quick, fleeting. You mean that? Yes, she replied. But I won't pretend it isn't there. Draco considered that, the tension in his shoulders easing just a fraction. You're asking for restraint. I'm asking for choice, Hermione said. Not denial. The ward hummed overhead, steady and unchanged, as if approving the balance they'd struck. Draco nodded once. All right, she echoed. We acknowledge it, he said. We don't act. We survive this. And whatever happens after, we decide it with clear heads, Hermione finished. He looked at her then, something softer breaking through the restraint. You're dangerous, Granger, she gave a faint smile. You always knew that. They stood there closer than they had any right to be, bound by truth rather than touch. Draco took a step back first. I'll take the watch, Hermione nodded. Wake me if the field shifts. I will. She lay down again, heart still racing, mind clearer than it had been in days. Nothing had happened. And yet, everything had. Because the truth was out now. Spoken, acknowledged, impossible to ignore. They wanted each other. They just weren't going to act on it. Not yet. And the restraint it took to hold that line felt heavier, somehow, than any magic ward could ever be. The argument started quietly. That was the most dangerous part. Hermione didn't remember raising her voice. She only remembered the tightness in her chest, the way every word felt like it had been waiting days to be said. You don't get to decide what happens after, she said, standing near the fire, arms crossed like armor. You don't get to make that choice for both of us. Draco turned slowly. I'm not deciding anything. I'm preventing damage. To whom? She demanded. To you, he said immediately. The certainty in his voice stopped her short. I don't need your protection, Hermione snapped. I need honesty. That is honesty, Draco shot back. This, he gestured sharply between them, is a mistake. Her laugh was sharp, brittle. Funny, it doesn't feel like one. It will, he said, stepping closer. When we leave. When reality comes back. When you remember who I am. I know exactly who you are, Hermione replied, her voice shaking now. And you don't get to decide that I'll regret this. Draco's jaw clenched. You're not thinking clearly. And you're lying, she fired back. To yourself. To me. The space between them shrank without either of them consciously choosing it. Say it, Hermione whispered. Say you don't want this. Draco stopped less than a foot away from her. His breath was warm, uneven. "I don't want this," he said. Hermione searched his face. "Say it again." He didn't. Instead, he said quietly, dangerously, "I don't want what comes after." The truth slammed into her chest. "That's not the same thing," she said softly. Draco's control finally cracked. "Do you have any idea," he said, voice low and strained, "how hard it is to stand this close to you and do nothing?" Hermione's pulse thundered. "Then stop doing nothing." For one suspended heartbeat, he looked at her like she was the only solid thing left in the world. Then he kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't careful. It was frustration and restraint snapping all at once, his mouth crashing against hers, like he'd been holding himself back for weeks, and finally gave up. Hermione gasped into the kiss, fingers fisting in his robes as the heat between them flared, wild and overwhelming. She kissed him back just as fiercely. All the anger burned away, replaced by something raw and desperate. Draco's hands came up to her waist, gripping hard enough to bruise through fabric, pulling her closer until there was no space left to deny. Hermione felt everything. The tension in his body, the way he shuddered when she dragged her nails lightly along his collar, the sharp inhale he took when she pressed closer without thinking. "This is a bad idea," he murmured against her mouth. "Then stop," she breathed. He didn't. His mouth traced along her jaw, her throat, lingering just long enough to make her ache. Hermione tilted her head back instinctively, heart racing, every nerve ending alive. His grip tightened, like he was afraid she might disappear if he loosened it. Then he stopped. Abruptly. Completely. Draco pulled back, breathing hard, forehead resting against hers, eyes closed like it physically hurt to open them. "No," he said hoarsely. "Not like this." Hermione's hands were still clenched in his robes. Her pulse roared in her ears. "Draco!" He shook his head, forcing himself to step back. "If I keep going, I won't stop." The restraint in his voice made her chest ache worse than the kiss had. She nodded slowly, swallowing hard, forcing herself to let go. They stood there, shaken, breathing in the aftermath of what they'd almost unleashed. The ward pulsed faintly overhead, not unstable this time. Aware. Hermione broke the silence first. "We crossed the line." Draco met her gaze, eyes dark, unguarded. "No," she frowned. "No? We touched it," he said. "That's not the same thing." Something twisted painfully in her chest. "We can't pretend that didn't happen," she said. "I'm not pretending," he replied. "I'm choosing to stop." She studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. "Then so am I." They stepped apart fully this time, the distance deliberate, heavy with meaning. Nothing had been resolved. Nothing had been undone. But something fundamental had changed. Because now Hermione knew exactly how Draco Malfoy kissed when he lost control. And Draco knew exactly how close she was to letting him. Neither of them slept easily that night. And both of them understood, with a clarity that left no room for denial. The restraint they were clinging to was already cracking. It was only a matter of time before it broke completely. Morning arrived like a question no one wanted to answer. Hermione woke slowly, the remnants of sleep clinging to her in fragments. Heat, breath, the ghost of a kiss that hadn't faded the way it should have. Her heart was already racing when she opened her eyes, as if her body had decided it remembered something important before her mind caught up. The fire was low, the ward steady, the clearing unchanged. Draco Malfoy was sitting on the far side of it, farther than he'd been in days. His posture was rigid, shoulders squared, attention fixed on the boundary with professional intensity. He looked exactly like the man she'd known at the ministry, controlled, composed, untouchable. It hurt. Hermione sat up quietly, wrapping the cloak tighter around herself, then stopped. The cloak. She slid it from her shoulders and folded it carefully, hands steady, despite the way her pulse thudded in her ears. She rose and crossed the clearing, placing it beside him without a word. Draco looked down at it, then up at her. Their eyes met. The moment stretched, heavy, charged, full of everything they weren't saying. "Thank you," Hermione said, because silence felt unbearable. Draco nodded once. "You're welcome," that was it. No apology, no acknowledgement, no mention of what had happened. Hermione turned away before she could lose her nerve and returned to her side of the clearing. The day passed in fragments. They worked. They monitored the field. They ate sparingly. They spoke only when necessary, voices neutral, words precise. It was as if they had both agreed, without saying so, that last night would not be referenced. Not yet. Hermione hated how much effort it took. Every movement felt weighted now. Every accidental glance lingered too long. She was acutely aware of him in a way that bordered on painful, the way his jaw tightened when he focused, the way his hands flexed unconsciously when he restrained himself. She knew restraint when she saw it. She was practicing it too. By midday, the silence between them had shifted again. Not hostile, not comfortable. Taut. Fragile. Like something stretched too far. "You're avoiding me," Draco said finally. Hermione looked up from her notes. "I'm being practical." "That's not an answer." She inhaled slowly. "I don't trust myself to talk about it without complicating things." His gaze sharpened. "You think this isn't already complicated?" She met his eyes. "I think saying the wrong thing could make it worse." Draco studied her for a long moment, then looked away. "You're not wrong." The admission landed quietly, but it mattered. They fell back into silence, the unsaid pressing in from all sides. Later, as dusk crept back into the clearing, Hermione noticed Draco wince, just slightly, as he shifted his weight. "Sit down," she said without thinking. He frowned. "I'm fine. You're not," she replied. "You've been on watch longer than you should." His jaw tightened. "I said, I know what you said," Hermione interrupted gently. "Sit." He hesitated, then did, lowering himself near the fire with a controlled exhale. Hermione knelt beside him before she could overthink it, keeping careful distance. "You're exhausted." "So are you," he said. "Yes," she agreed. "But you're worse." His mouth twitched despite himself. "Always observant." She offered him water. He took it. Their fingers brushed. This time, neither of them froze. They simply acknowledged it. A brief look. A shared breath. Nothing more. Hermione stood and stepped back, heart pounding. "We can't do that again," she said quietly. Draco's voice was low. "I know. And you can't keep pushing yourself like this." "I know," he repeated. She hesitated. "Let me take watch tonight." Draco looked at her. Really looked at her. "You're sure?" "Yes." Another pause. Then he nodded. "All right." That night, Hermione stayed awake. She watched the ward, listened to the forest, counted breaths that were not her own. Draco slept on the other side of the clearing, rest finally claiming him despite the tension that still hummed between them. Hermione let herself look at him then. The lines of strain softened by sleep. The careful control temporarily lowered. He looked vulnerable. Her chest tightened. Last night had not been a mistake. That realization settled into her bones with quiet certainty. It had been dangerous, reckless, ill-timed, but it had been honest. Hermione turned her gaze back to the boundary, jaw set. They couldn't go back. And they couldn't go forward like this forever. Sooner or later they would have to face what came after the breaking point. And whatever that was, she knew one thing with painful clarity. It would change everything. The consequence wasn't regret. Hermione waited for it, expected it to arrive with the morning light, sharp and condemning, ready to tell her she had crossed a line she couldn't uncross. It didn't come. What came instead was distance. Deliberate. Measured. Painfully controlled. Draco woke later than usual, exhaustion having finally claimed him. When he rose, he did so quietly, efficiently, as if slipping back into a role he knew by heart. He didn't look at her right away, didn't offer his cloak, didn't comment on the fire or the ward or the still-failed retrieval field. Professional. Impeccable. Hermione hated it. She hated how easily he could put the walls back up, hated how much effort it took for her to do the same. They worked in silence through the morning, passing information without inflection, avoiding unnecessary proximity. When their paths nearly crossed near the fire, Draco adjusted first, stepping aside with careful precision. The restraint was intentional, and it hurt. "You don't have to do that," Hermione said quietly. Draco paused but didn't turn. "Do what?" "Act like I'm fragile," she replied. His shoulders tightened. "I'm acting like you asked me to." "I asked for restraint," she said. "Not avoidance." He finally faced her, expression carefully neutral. "What's the difference?" Hermione opened her mouth, then closed it again, because she didn't know how to explain that restraint still acknowledged what existed between them. Avoidance pretended it didn't. "That's not fair," she said at last. Draco's gaze sharpened. "Neither is pretending last night didn't change anything." "It did," Hermione insisted. "That's exactly my point." "Then accept the consequences," he replied. "This is one of them." She took a step closer before she could stop herself. "You think pushing me away will make this easier?" "No," he said honestly. "I think it will make it survivable." The word settled heavy between them. Survivable. As if this, whatever it was something dangerous enough to endure rather than explore. Hermione's voice softened. "You don't have to punish yourself." "I'm not," Draco replied. "I'm protecting us." "From what?" she demanded. He hesitated. "From wanting more than we can have." Her chest tightened painfully. "You don't know that. I know enough," he said. "I know what happens when people like me forget their place." The words cut deeper than she expected. "That's not true," Hermione said fiercely. "You're not—" "Don't!" Draco interrupted, voice tight. "Please don't." She stopped, breath hitching. The truth was he was afraid. Not of her. Of the future. And she didn't know how to argue with that without breaking something fragile between them. They returned to their tasks, the distance between them stretching and shrinking in uneven rhythms. Hermione caught him watching her when he thought she wasn't looking. She felt the pull every time he passed too close, every time his voice softened despite his resolve. The ward pulsed faintly mid-afternoon, stronger than it had before. They both felt it. Draco turned immediately. "That was closer." "Yes," Hermione said. "Much closer." Hope flared. Unwelcome. Dangerous. "If they retrieve us soon," Hermione began. Draco's jaw tightened. "Then this ends." The certainty in his voice stung. She met his gaze. "Or it begins." His eyes darkened. "You don't know what you're asking." "I know exactly what I'm asking," she replied. "I'm asking you not to decide for me." Silence stretched. Then Draco looked away. "I can't promise you anything." "I'm not asking for promises," Hermione said. "Just honesty." He nodded once. "Then here it is." He stepped closer, careful, restrained, stopping well short of the ward's threshold. "I want you," he said quietly. "Still, more than I should. Enough that it scares me." Hermione's breath caught. And I don't trust myself not to want more," he finished. "Not if we let this keep happening." The admission hurt, but it was honest. Hermione swallowed. "Then maybe the consequence isn't distance." His eyes lifted to hers. "What is it then?" She held his gaze, steady and unflinching. "Choice." The word hung between them, fragile and powerful. Draco studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded, slow and deliberate. All right. All right? She echoed. When we get out, he said. We decide then. Not from fear, not from isolation. Relief washed through her, sharp and dizzying. And until then? She asked softly. Draco's mouth curved faintly. Not a smile, but something close. Until then, we endure. The distance remained, but it felt different now. Not like punishment, like something held carefully in place. That night, Hermione slept again, lighter than she had in days. And for the first time since the portkey failed, she wasn't afraid of what came after. She was afraid of wanting it too much, and of the quiet, dangerous hope that when the choice finally came, neither of them would walk away. Waiting had changed. It was no longer just the absence of rescue or the steady patience of survival. It was something heavier now, something that pressed into every quiet moment and turned it sharp. Hermione felt it the moment she woke. The ward hummed overhead, stable and calm. The forest breathed softly around the clearing. Draco sat near the boundary, posture relaxed but alert, the distance between them still deliberate. Chosen. She sat up slowly, heart already racing for reasons that had nothing to do with danger. They didn't speak at first. They didn't need to. Everything they'd said yesterday lingered between them like a held breath. Choice, honesty, after. Words that had shifted the ground beneath her feet without resolving anything at all. Hermione rose and joined him near the fire, keeping careful space. The field feels closer, she said. Draco nodded. It does, not hopeful, not guarded, just observant. They worked through the morning in parallel lines, moving around each other with practiced awareness. When Hermione knelt to reinforce a rune, Draco adjusted the fire without being asked. When he paced the boundary, she tracked the fluctuations he couldn't see. They didn't touch. That was the hardest part. Every accidental brush that didn't happen felt louder than the ones that had before. Every moment of restraint carried weight, like tension pulled tight enough to hum. By midday, the air had warmed, the forest bright and deceptively peaceful. Hermione wiped her brow and leaned back on her hands, staring up at the canopy. You're thinking too loudly, Draco said. She huffed softly. You can't hear thoughts. No, he replied. But I know what overthinking looks like on you. She glanced at him. And what does it look like? Like you're bracing for impact, he said. Even when nothing's coming. Hermione swallowed. Something is coming. He studied her. You're not wrong. The honesty of it sent a shiver through her. Later, as dusk crept in again, the ward pulsed. Stronger this time, resonant enough that Hermione gasped softly. Draco was at her side instantly. That was it. Yes, she breathed. They're close, really close. Hope flared, bright and dangerous. Draco's jaw tightened. Then we need to be ready. Hermione nodded, heart pounding. Ready for rescue. Ready for separation. Ready for everything they hadn't decided yet. They stood there together, close enough that she could feel the heat of him again, the familiar pull tightening in her chest. Draco, she said quietly. Yes, if this ends soon. She hesitated. I don't want the last thing between us to be distance. His breath hitched almost imperceptibly. What do you want it to be? She turned to face him fully, meeting his gaze without flinching. Truth, even if that's all we're allowed right now. Silence stretched. Then Draco nodded. All right. He lifted his hand slowly, not touching her, not crossing the line they'd drawn, but close enough that Hermione could feel the intent behind it. I'm holding back, he said quietly. Every instinct I have says pull you closer, but I'm choosing not to. Her pulse thundered. I know, and I don't resent you for it, he continued. I resent the timing. A soft, breathless laugh escaped her. Me too. They stood there, suspended in the moment, close enough that restraint felt like a physical force. Draco's voice dropped. If we weren't here, if this were anywhere else. Hermione shook her head gently. Then it would be a different choice. He searched her face. And after, her heart ached. After. We decide without fear. He nodded once, accepting it. The ward pulsed again, brighter this time, the air rippling with unmistakable intent. They both felt it. Draco stepped back first, control snapping into place. We should prepare. Yes, Hermione said, forcing her breathing steady. They moved apart, returning to their roles with precision born of necessity. But something had shifted again. Not forward, not back. Tighter. Heavier. As night fell, Hermione lay awake, staring up at the canopy, every sense attuned to the possibility that rescue might come at any moment. She wasn't afraid of leaving anymore. She was afraid of what it would mean to stay, and of how much she wanted to choose it anyway. Across the clearing, Draco kept watch, gaze fixed on the boundary, jaw set with quiet determination. Neither of them slept easily. Because waiting now wasn't just about rescue. It was about whether they would have the courage to choose each other once the world came rushing back in. The pull came without warning. Hermione felt it first. Not as a sound or a light, but as pressure. The air thickened suddenly, magic folding in on itself like something reaching from the other side and grabbing hold. She gasped, hand flying to her chest. Draco! I feel it, he said sharply, already moving toward her. That's not a probe, that's a lock. The ward shuddered overhead, its steady hum breaking into a fractured pulse. Runes flared along the boundary, reacting all at once, bright and insistent. Hermione's heart slammed. They found us. Draco's jaw tightened. Yes, relief should have come first. Instead, panic did. Because this fragile equilibrium, this suspended moment where nothing had been decided but everything had been felt, was about to end. Now. Hermione forced herself to focus, lifting her wand and stepping into position. I need to anchor the field. If the retrieval spell snaps too fast. I've got you, Draco said immediately, already aligning his magic with hers. The air rippled violently. Hermione staggered as the force pulled, instinctively reaching out, and Draco caught her. One arm wrapped around her waist, solid and grounding, his other hand bracing her wrist as their magic synchronized without effort. Hermione felt the jolt of it. Not just the spell, but him, steady and unwavering against the pull. For one suspended heartbeat, nothing else existed. Just his grip. Just her breath. Just the awareness that this might be the last moment they had like this. The spell faltered. Hermione adjusted instinctively. Draco, I need you to... I know, he said, voice low and fierce. I'm not letting go. The ward flared brilliant white. The clearing blurred. And then, silence. The pressure vanished as abruptly as it had come, leaving Hermione dizzy, heart racing, magic still thrumming through her veins. She blinked. They were still there. The forest. The fire. The ward. Unbroken. Hermione sucked in a breath. It didn't take. Draco loosened his grip slightly but didn't step away. They aborted. Her stomach dropped. Why would they abort? He looked at her, eyes dark. Because something went wrong on their end. The implication settled heavy and unwelcome. They'll try again, Hermione said. Yes, Draco agreed. Soon. They were still standing far too close. Hermione became acutely aware of it all at once. His arm still around her, her hand still braced against his chest, the way neither of them had moved to correct it. She looked up. He was already looking at her. The moment stretched. Taut. Electric. Unguarded. We don't have much time, Draco said quietly. Her voice was barely a whisper. I know, neither of them moved. Not because they didn't understand the risk. Because understanding it didn't make the wanting disappear. Draco's hand slid from her waist, slowly, deliberately. but his thumb lingered just a fraction longer than necessary, pressing lightly, as if to confirm she was real. Hermione's breath hitched. "This is cruel," she said softly. "The timing." "Yes," he replied. "It always is." She swallowed. "When they come back, that might be it." "I know. And we won't get a moment like this again," she added. His jaw tightened. Don't what?" "Don't say goodbye before we have to," he said quietly. "I can't stand it." The honesty in his voice broke something open in her chest. Hermione stepped back, not from fear but from necessity. "Then tell me one thing." Draco stilled. "What?" "When we're back," she said, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "When the world comes rushing in again, are you going to disappear on me?" The question landed heavy. Draco didn't answer immediately. Then, slowly, "No," her breath caught. "You're sure?" "I don't know what happens next," he said. "But I know I'm not walking away." Relief flooded her, sharp and dizzying. "Good," Hermione whispered. "Because neither am I." The ward pulsed again, stronger this time. Both of them felt it. Draco straightened, control snapping back into place, even as his eyes lingered on her for one last unguarded moment. "It's coming," he said. Hermione nodded, heart pounding. "Then this isn't the end." "No," Draco agreed softly. "It's just interrupted." They moved into position side by side, magic ready, bodies angled towards separation rather than collision. But Hermione carried one certainty with her as the air began to bend again. Whatever happened next, whatever the world tried to reassert, what they had built here was real. And this time, it wouldn't be left unfinished. The second pull was cleaner. Hermione felt it lock into place with clinical precision, the unmistakable signature of a ministry retrieval spell done right. The air folded inward, magic tightening like a held breath finally released. She didn't stumble this time. Neither did Draco. They stood shoulder to shoulder, wands raised, magic aligned without discussion. It struck her, in that strange suspended moment before the spell completed, how natural that felt. How instinctive. "As soon as it takes," Hermione said, voice steady despite the way her heart was racing. "Don't fight it." Draco nodded. "I won't." The ward shattered in a burst of white light. The forest vanished. For a fraction of a second, Hermione felt weightless, untethered. The world reduced to sensation and motion and the unmistakable feeling of being pulled away. Then stone slammed back into existence. Cold marble beneath her feet. High ceilings. The sharp crack of displaced air. Voices overlapping in alarm and relief. Hermione staggered, catching herself before she fell. Hands reached for her. Steady. Grounding. Draco. He was still there. Still solid. Still real. The relief hit her so hard it almost hurt. "Heads up! She's disoriented!" someone barked. "Get a healer." "I'm fine," Hermione said automatically, pulling her arm free even as she scanned the room. Ministry atrium. Emergency ward sigils still glowing faintly in the air. Kingsley Shacklebolt stood several feet away, expression tight with concern and relief. "Granger," Kingsley said. "Malfoy, thank Merlin." Draco stepped away from her then. Just one step. Enough to remind her that the clearing was gone. That whatever had existed there now had walls. Witnesses. Consequences. "We lost the signal twice," Kingsley continued. "The field was interfering with the portkey anchor. It doesn't matter," Hermione interrupted gently. "We're here," Kingsley nodded, studying them both more closely than she liked. "Healers will want to clear you. We're stable," Hermione said. "Just fatigued." Draco said nothing. He stood beside her, posture composed, face unreadable. The version of him the world recognized. It felt like losing him again in real time. They were escorted through the atrium, questions coming in fragments, officials already moving on to causes and reports and next steps. Hermione answered on instinct, professional to the core. She felt Draco's presence beside her the entire time. She did not feel his touch. When they reached the assessment corridor, a healer stepped between them. "Malfoy, this way." Draco paused, just for a fraction of a second. His gaze flicked to Hermione. Not longing, not fear. Promise. "I'll see you," he said quietly. "Not goodbye. Not later. See you." Hermione nodded once, throat tight. Yes, he followed the healer down the corridor without looking back. Hermione let herself breathe only after he was gone. The assessment passed in a blur. Questions. Scans. Wand-light tracing familiar paths. Fatigue confirmed. No lasting magical damage. When she was finally released, the atrium had thinned. Night pressed against the tall windows, the city beyond quiet and unaware. Hermione stepped out into the corridor and stopped. Draco was leaning against the wall opposite the exit, coat back on, hair still damp from the healer's charms. He looked tired, controlled, waiting. Her heart kicked hard in her chest. "They cleared you?" she asked. "Yes," he said. Silence stretched between them. Not awkward, not empty, just full. "We should debrief," Hermione said finally. "Yes," Draco agreed. "Tomorrow," she hesitated. "And after?" Draco pushed off the wall and stepped closer, not invading her space, but near enough that she felt that familiar pull again, quieter now, steadier. "After," he said, voice low. "We decide. Not here. Not watched. Not rushed." Hermione nodded. "All right." For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Draco stepped back first, not retreating, just giving her space. "I meant what I said," he added. "I'm not disappearing. I know," Hermione replied. He held her gaze for one last beat, then turned and walked away, boots echoing softly down the corridor. Hermione watched until he was gone. Only then did she let the weight of it settle. They had been pulled apart by magic, by walls, by the world rushing back in. And yet, nothing essential had been lost. The clearing was gone, but what they'd found there had survived the crossing. And this time, Hermione knew, it wouldn't be left behind. The world wasted no time reclaiming her. Hermione barely made it through the doors of her flat before her comm mirror chimed, then chimed again, then again. Each pulse another demand, another expectation snapping back into place like she had never vanished at all. She ignored it. For once. She set her bag down carefully, removed her coat, and stood in the quiet of her sitting room, heart still beating a fraction too fast. The city lights spilled through the window, bright and indifferent. Normal. It felt unreal. She moved to the window and pressed her forehead lightly against the cool glass. The clearing felt farther away than it had any right to be. Not because it wasn't real, but because the world didn't make space for things like that. For slow understanding. For shared silence. For the kind of truth that required time. Hermione exhaled slowly. "We decide," Draco had said. "Not now. Not here. Not under the Ministry's watchful eyes." She trusted him enough to believe he meant it. That realization startled her more than anything else. The next morning arrived with ruthless efficiency. Briefings, reports, a crowded conference room filled with clipped voices and technical language. Hermione presented her findings with calm precision, detailing the field anomaly, the portkey interference, the aborted retrieval attempts. She did not mention Draco's arm around her waist. She did not mention the ward reacting to proximity. She did not mention the way the forest had felt like a living thing holding its breath. Kingsley listened closely, nodding, eyes sharp. "We'll convene a task force," he said. "This kind of anomaly can't be left unexplored." Hermione inclined her head. "Of course." She didn't look across the table. She didn't need to. She could feel Draco there anyway. He spoke when necessary, precise, controlled. Nothing in his tone betrayed the weeks they had spent together, the choices they had deferred, the line they had nearly crossed and held back from anyway. It was infuriating. It was impressive. It was exactly who he was. The meeting ended at last, chairs scraping, voices rising as people broke into smaller conversations. Hermione gathered her notes, every instinct telling her not to leave yet. She didn't have to wait long. Granger, she turned. Draco stood a few feet away, hands in his coat pockets, expression unreadable. The corridor behind him was emptying quickly. Walk with me, he said. It wasn't a question. They moved side by side down the hall, their pace unhurried, as if this were an ordinary conversation between colleagues. Hermione felt every step like a test of restraint. Are you all right? He asked quietly. Yes, she replied. You? Fine, he said. Then after a beat, tired, she nodded. Me too. They reached the end of the corridor and stopped near a tall window overlooking the atrium. Sunlight spilled in, bright and merciless. This isn't the clearing, Draco said. No, Hermione agreed. And it won't be, he continued. Not again. She studied his reflection in the glass. I know, but what we decide, he said, voice low, has to survive this. The implication settled heavily. You're afraid, Hermione said. Yes, Draco replied without hesitation. Are you? She considered it. Yes, he nodded once. Good, she frowned. Good? If neither of us were afraid, he said. It wouldn't be real. Something in her chest eased at that. We said we'd decide, Hermione said carefully. Not rush. And we will, Draco agreed. But I needed to see you. Out here. In the world. She met his gaze. Why? To make sure, he said quietly, that I still choose you. The words hit her harder than any spell ever had. And? She asked, voice steady only through sheer force of will. Draco held her gaze, unflinching. I do. Hermione's breath caught. Then so do I. They stood there for a moment longer than was strictly professional, the world flowing around them, unaware of the gravity of the choice being made in the space between two people who had already survived worse. Draco stepped back first, reclaiming his distance without erasing what had just been said. Tonight, he said. Somewhere private, somewhere real. Hermione nodded. All right. He turned and walked away, shoulders squared, control firmly back in place. Hermione watched him go, heart pounding. Not with fear this time, but with something steadier. The world had rushed back in, but it hadn't swept them apart. And as Hermione gathered her things and stepped back into the noise and movement of the ministry, she knew whatever came next wouldn't be an accident. It would be a choice. And this time, she was ready to make it. Hermione chose a place without thinking too hard about it. Not a restaurant. Not somewhere public. Not somewhere that required conversation to fill the space between silences. She chose her flat. It felt honest. Draco arrived precisely on time. No knock, just the soft chime of the wards announcing a recognised signature. Hermione opened the door before her nerves could get the better of her. For a moment, they just looked at each other. No Forest, no ward, no suspended time. Just the quiet hum of the city beyond the windows and the weight of everything they hadn't yet said. You look real, Draco said finally. Hermione huffed softly. You too. He stepped inside, removing his coat and setting it neatly over the chair as if grounding himself in the ritual of normalcy. Hermione closed the door behind him, the click of the latch sounding louder than it should have. This is strange, Draco said. Yes, she agreed. But not bad, he nodded. No, not bad. They moved through the space carefully at first, like people relearning each other's gravity. Hermione poured tea because it gave her something to do with her hands. Draco accepted it without comment, watching her over the rim of the cup. "This is where you disappear to," he said, glancing around. "When the world gets too loud, it's quiet," Hermione replied. "It listens without demanding," he smiled faintly. "That tracks." They sat across from each other, knees angled inward despite the distance. Hermione felt the pull again, quieter here, steadier, less volatile. "This isn't the clearing," Draco said again. "No," Hermione replied. "But it's where we decide." He met her gaze. "All right," she took a breath. "I don't want something secret, or fleeting, or something we pretend didn't matter." "Neither do I," Draco said immediately. "I don't want to fix you," she continued. "And I don't want to be fixed." His eyes softened. "Good. I want honesty," she said. "Boundaries, choice." Draco leaned forward slightly. "And if those boundaries change, then we talk," Hermione replied. "Not disappear." The word lingered, pointed and deliberate. Draco exhaled slowly. "I can do that?" She studied him. "You're sure?" "I'm terrified," he said. "But yes, I'm sure." Something in her chest loosened. "Then here's the truth," Hermione said quietly. "I didn't imagine this. I didn't invent it because we were isolated. I felt it before the forest, and I'll feel it after." Draco's voice was low. "I know." "How?" "Because it followed me out," he said. "And it didn't fade." Silence settled. Not awkward, not charged. Certain. Hermione stood slowly, crossing the space between them. She stopped an arm's length away, giving him time, giving him choice. Draco rose too. They stood facing each other in the quiet of her flat, the city's glow painting soft shadows across familiar faces made unfamiliar by honesty. "This is where we stop pretending," Hermione said. Draco nodded. "Yes." She lifted her hand. Not touching yet. Waiting. He didn't hesitate. Draco closed the distance himself, slow and deliberate, as if memorizing the moment. When his hand came to rest at her waist, it was careful, reverent. Hermione's fingers slid into the front of his shirt, feeling his heartbeat beneath her palm. "This is different," he murmured. "Yes," she whispered. "Because we chose it." The kiss that followed was nothing like the one in the clearing. There was no anger, no desperation, no snapping restraint. It was deep and intentional, unhurried, built from trust rather than urgency. Draco's hand tightened at her waist, anchoring her as Hermione leaned into him, every sense awake and steady. When they parted, foreheads resting together, neither of them was shaking. "Stay," Hermione said quietly. Draco didn't answer with words. He stayed. Later, much later, when the city lights dimmed and the world finally softened its grip, Hermione lay awake for a moment, listening to breathing that wasn't hers, steady and warm beside her. The clearing was gone. The waiting was over. And for the first time since the war, since the expectations and the fear and the endless bracing, Hermione Granger felt certain of one thing. This wasn't an ending. It was a beginning they had chosen together.